The Reserve Bank of India has released its annual report for this year, which is essentially a report card for the state of our economy. And this is especially important right now because we're still assessing the economic impact that the lockdown and the COVID-19 pandemic has had on our economy. Now, one of the first things RBI talks about is the impact as far as our GDP is concerned. Now, a contraction in GDP is something that is expected, but Reserve Bank has refrained from making any projection of its own. However, it has cited the International Monetary Fund. Now, the IMF projects India's GDP is going to contract by as much as 4.5%. But what is also worrying here from what RBI has said is that we did see some sort of a recovery coming in as far as May and June is concerned, but then that tapered off as we went into July, August. And the main reason for this is the re-imposition of lockdown in some parts of the country. Now, we did see a spike in COVID cases in several states, and many of them took a decision to go back into lockdown mode, either statewide or in certain pockets of the state. And that is hurting the recovery process, and we could see the contraction in GDP go well into the following year as well. And this is something that is concerning. Now, that's one part of the story. The other part, of course, is the impact as far as demand and consumption is concerned. This is a big area which has been hit severely. Now, the RBI says that the key to demand recovery is going to be government consumption. What that essentially means is the government needs to spend more, and that is how we are going to see the resumption as far as the consumption and demand is concerned. So that is the other part. There is a silver lining here because rural demand is improving quicker and better than urban demand. So this is the second part that the RBI has spoken about. And of course, there is the impact on the fiscal deficit because the government obviously has to be spending much more than it had earlier anticipated. So fiscal deficit is going to deteriorate to as much as 7.5% of the GDP of the country. That is more obviously than what was earlier estimated before the lockdown actually came into force and before the pandemic actually hit. Now, the RBI has also called for a deep-seated, wide-ranging reforms as a way to sort of help come out of this economic contraction that we are seeing at the moment and that we are likely to see going forward as well, which essentially implies that all the reforms announced so far by the government is clearly not going to be enough. And that is what comes out from what the Reserve Bank is saying. So these are some of the key highlights as far as this report is concerned and the impact of the coronavirus pandemic.